All right, everyone, empty your pockets and no one gets hurt.
Just a few weeks remain before Spider-Man Brand New Day finally hits theaters. The film is shaping up to be the biggest superhero blockbuster of the year. To celebrate its release, I decided to make a video exploring the Brand New Day storyline from Marvel Comics. If you're curious about what really happened in the comics and want to understand the true meaning behind the Brand New Day era, be sure to watch until the end. We'll compare the comic storyline with the upcoming movie and see just how different they might be.
Nice.
Before Brand New Day began, Peter Parker's life had fallen into one of its darkest periods. During the events of Civil War, under the influence of Tony Stark, also known as Iron Man, Peter made a decision that shocked the entire world. He publicly revealed that he was Spider-Man in front of the global media. That choice led to devastating consequences. His greatest enemies, especially Kingpin, took advantage of his exposed identity and hired an assassin to kill him. But the bullet missed Peter and instead struck Aunt May, leaving her critically wounded and on the brink of death. In absolute despair, when both the science and magic of other superheroes proved utterly useless, Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson were forced to confront Mephisto, the Lord of Hell in the Marvel Universe. Mephisto offered a sinister deal. He would save Aunt May's life, but the price to pay was not Peter's soul, but his marriage to Mary Jane. He wanted to erase their most sacred love, the greatest happiness of Peter's life. Peter and Mary Jane accepted the sacrifice. This pivotal event forms the very core of One More Day. Soon after, the One Moment in Time arc arrived to explain the physical and magical aftermath of the deal with the devil. Thanks to a massive containment spell by Doctor Strange that kept Mary Jane's memories intact, the rest of the world forgot Spider-Man's true identity entirely. After the world's memory was rebooted, Peter Parker fell into a severe psychological crisis. He vanished completely, failing to appear as Spider-Man for 100 consecutive days. Living an extremely low-profile life, he withdrew from the world and hid from society by crashing at Aunt May's house. However, life couldn't stay stagnant forever. Aunt May, with her fierce yet tough love, bluntly demanded that Peter step out of his comfort zone.
You need to move out, be independent, and take care of your own life.
These words served as the wake-up call that thrust Peter Parker back into the harsh reality of making a living in New York City, restarting his journey from absolute scratch. When Peter Parker stepped out into society to look for a normal job to cover his rent and living expenses, he immediately hit a brick wall called employment history. Even though the world no longer knew he was Spider-Man, the consequences of his past superhero life still left massive scars on his resume. In the past, whenever Peter managed to land a part-time or full-time job at scientific institutions or newsrooms, he would always vanish without a word. When police sirens wailed or supervillains attacked the city, Peter was forced to drop everything and slip out the window to don his Spidey suit. These unexcused absences lasting days on end turned Peter Parker into an incredibly erratic, irresponsible, and unreliable employee in the eyes of all prospective employers.
Another element compounding Peter's tragic financial plight was his prior shift in status. In the Civil War era, as Tony Stark's protege and ally, Peter and his family relocated to Avengers Tower. His entire livelihood, research grants, and high-tech gear were completely bankrolled by the billionaire. Sheltered by this arrangement, Peter was freed from the need for conventional employment for years. When that bond shattered and the world's timeline reset, Peter was left confronting a massive employment gap that he could not legally justify to regular hiring managers. To them, he looked like a chronic slacker or a suspicious character with something to hide. Amidst Peter Parker's desperate struggle with his personal life, a new seismic shift rocked the New York criminal underworld with the emergence of Mr. Negative, Martin Lee. Standing as one of the most exceptionally written and complex Marvel villains of the 21st century, he later cemented his status as a core icon in the blockbuster game Marvel's Spider-Man by Insomniac Games. The comic book debut of Mr. Negative was marked by a deeply ruthless yet profoundly character-defining scene. A corrupt New York police officer is conducting a shady deal with a group of underworld henchmen. After securing the item, the henchmen double-cross him, stiffing the cop out of the large sum of money he was owed, and smugly walk away. Right at that moment, Mr. Negative steps out of the shadows. Unlike ordinary mob bosses who care only about profit, Mr. Negative represents an organized and strictly principled criminal philosophy. He immediately reprimands his henchmen in a cold yet authoritative tone. "If we don't keep our word, what worth do we have left? We are villains. We need the police to look the other way for what we do. But will they ever do that if every time we ask they fear being shortchanged? You men are terrible henchmen." Immediately following that rebuke, and right in front of the panicked cop, Mr. Negative mercilessly butchered the double-crossing lackeys without a shred of hesitation. This act demonstrated to the policeman that Martin Lee is a straight shooter who stands by his promises and respects contracts. Concurrently, he issued a chilling ultimatum to the cop: "Do not ever cross me. You've entered my world. From now on, you answer to me." This calculated savagery instantly cemented Mr. Negative's position as a terrifying overlord, one who governs his syndicate not by greed, but by cold fear and ironclad discipline. The core objective of Mr. Negative's initial operations was the very artifact his henchmen had seized, an ancient tablet chronicling the history and secrets of the ancient Lifeline civilization. In the Marvel Universe, the Lifeline tablet is no ordinary antique for display. It contains mystical formulas and supreme knowledge that allow its wielder to manipulate the laws of life and death, controlling the energies of life, death, and entropy. This artifact was the golden key for Mr. Negative to realize a massive purge aimed at monopolizing New York. The Brand New Day arc marked the moment Marvel chose to completely overhaul Peter Parker's romantic life. Having dissolved his marriage to Mary Jane, the Marvel editorial team made a fiercely direct and rather ruthless declaration to veteran fans. Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson were finished for good, and a remarriage was entirely off the table. To fill the vacancy, they debuted an entirely new character, Carly Cooper. Carly Cooper was introduced as an intelligent and perceptive forensic expert within the NYPD. Instead of being a mere trophy girl waiting for a rescue, she brought a sharp, logical mind and a highly independent streak to the table. A bond soon developed between Peter and Carly, sparking a promising yet complex romance, as Peter constantly struggled to hide his second identity. The complexity of Peter's life reached a boiling point when he and Carly were strolling down the street, only to be abruptly ambushed and mugged by a criminal, wearing a Spider-Man mask. This was a brilliantly clever writing choice by Marvel. Since the real Spider-Man had been missing for 100 days, the criminal underworld recognized a golden opportunity, exploiting the Web-Slinger's name and likeness to commit illegal acts. The public and the police would easily believe that Spider-Man had gone rogue, creating the perfect cover for the perpetrators. Plunged into this situation, Peter Parker faced an agonizing dilemma. He couldn't give the mugger a proper beating or display his superhuman physical feats, like lifting cars or dodging bullets, right in front of Carly Cooper, as doing so would instantly blow his civilian cover. As a result, the criminal made off with Peter's wallet, which held all his ID papers and his very last cents, and even worse, snatched his web shooters, his most vital weapon. Peter only managed to discreetly plant a spider tracer on the thug before he escaped. However, he decided against donning the Spider-Man suit to hunt him down immediately. Peter harbored a petty grudge against the Daily Bugle, the newspaper that had fired him after his public unmasking in the old Civil War timeline. He wanted to prove that without his exclusive Spider-Man photos, J. Jonah Jameson's paper would quickly wither away and go bankrupt. Deprived of his web shooters to swing between skyscrapers, Peter had no choice but to track the beacon on foot, roaming the streets. His path led him past the FEAST shelter, a charity network for the homeless and destitute established by Martin Lee, Mr. Negative's benevolent public persona, which also served as the place where Aunt May dedicated all her time. At the center, a comedic yet tragic misunderstanding occurred. Aunt May had regularly vented to Martin Lee about Peter's ragged appearance, emotional distress, and erratic late-night hours, leading Martin Lee to draw the wrong conclusion entirely. When he noticed Peter loitering near the entrance in a bedraggled state, Lee mistook him for a vagrant. Embracing his role as a magnanimous savior, Martin Lee ushered Peter indoors, supplying him with new attire, footwear, and food. This duality between the compassionate Martin Lee and the barbaric Mr. Negative forged a profound irony that only the audience, and eventually Peter, could fathom. Marking one of the most psychologically and emotionally charged peaks of the entire arc, Peter Parker goes toe-to-toe with J. Jonah Jameson inside the Daily Bugle. Suffocating under a crushing financial burden, Peter seeks out Jameson to claim the back pay for his photography. To Peter, it is a matter of survival. yet hardwired with stinginess, despotism, and an innate hostility rooted in the old timeline where Peter unmasked himself. Liped from memory but preserved in gut instinct, Jameson delivers a cold refusal. He relentlessly demeans Peter, branding him an ungrateful parasite feeding on the tabloid's charity. This insult broke the dam, bursting through Peter's years of suppressed agony. Rising violently, he pointed a finger at the media tycoon and let out a roar of pure indignation. This wasn't merely a cry for financial justice, it was the liberation of a superhero's deep-seated resentment, a savior of the city reduced to a struggling laborer living in squalor. Jameson, a man who refused to be eclipsed by anyone, turned livid, ready to counterattack. However, the lethal combination of skyrocketing blood pressure and violent rage triggered a sudden cardiac arrest. Gripping his chest, Jameson plummeted to the ground, struck down by a massive heart attack. Amidst the ensuing panic and the blare of sirens, Peter's innate heroism conquered his fury. He instantly dropped to his knees, administering CPR to sustain Jameson's fading pulse until medical help took over. While Jameson was wheeled into the ambulance in critical state, Robbie Robertson, the managing editor and Jameson's voice of reason, drew Peter away. Robbie offered no blame. Instead, he made a poignant appeal to Peter's conscience. If Peter wished to protect his former coworkers and prevent the Bugle's ruin during Jameson's incapacitation, he had to go out, find Spider-Man, and secure those exclusive snapshots. Driven by profound reverence for Robbie, the lone beacon of fairness and decency in his life at the paper, Peter relented. His 100-day self-imposed retirement was officially over. Spider-Man had to return. J. Jonah Jameson's heart attack opened a golden opportunity for Dexter Bennett, a ruthless media tycoon who had long coveted ownership of the Daily Bugle. The Bugle was a publicly traded company on the stock market, and Jameson was the majority shareholder, giving him supreme decision-making power. As Jameson lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to ventilators, drifting between life and death, his wife, Marla Jameson, made a decisive choice upon looking at the shambles of the newsroom and her husband's condition. She realized that his obsessive passion for the newspaper would ultimately kill him. She declared, "I always knew this company would be the death of you, and I won't trade your life for it." Acting as Jameson's legal proxy in this emergency, she called her lawyers and ordered the immediate liquidation of all the Jameson family shares on the stock market to execute a complete withdrawal. Dexter Bennett instantly seized the moment, pumping in cash to buy up all those shares and becoming the new owner of the Daily Bugle. Bennett did not view the newsroom as a family the way Jameson did, who, despite his tyrannical ways, still possessed a sense of loyalty. He treated it as a pure business tool, transforming the office into a suffocating, deeply insecure environment where anyone could be fired on the spot if they failed to turn an immediate profit. While the media world was shifting, the street mugger who had stolen Peter's wallet and web shooters was attempting to fence his loot. He brought the items to a black market fence in the underworld. However, the buyer openly despised Peter's pathetic wallet and completely failed to recognize the value of the web shooters. To an untrained eye, the sophisticated firing mechanism built by Peter looked like nothing more than a cheap metal band or a useless homemade toy. During the ensuing argument, as the mugger bragged to drive up the price, he accidentally triggered the web shooter's mechanism. A web line shot out, carrying along a spider tracer that embedded itself directly onto a nearby mob henchman. Though he couldn't sell it for a high price, the thief realized this gadget possessed incredibly powerful rope shooting technology. He decided to keep it to upgrade his robbing trade, allowing him to pull off much more efficient heists. The spider tracer accidentally fired onto the mobster unwittingly shifted the plot toward a new character, Bruno. Bruno held a highly unique position in New York's criminal underworld. He was the legitimate heir to two of the largest mafia families, who were traditionally mortal enemies. Bruno's parents belonged to opposing factions, but their marriage years ago had been a political alliance, unifying the entire underworld under one banner. However, Bruno was all brawn and no brains, a foolish young patriarch devoid of any leadership skills or strategic vision, who cared only about a lavish, hedonistic lifestyle. Recognizing his incompetence, the elders and mob bosses sidelined Bruno, running all criminal operations themselves without giving him a cut. Infuriated, Bruno was desperately looking for any way to reclaim the criminal empire that was rightfully his. Little did he know, he was already walking straight into the crosshairs of a far more terrifying force, Mr. Negative. The moment Bruno stepped out of a casino, he was immediately abducted by Mr. Negative's inner demons gang. It was here that Mr. Negative's true agenda was exposed, revealing a criminal mastermind operating on a macro level with utter ruthlessness. Mr. Negative didn't rely on conventional weapons like bombs or guns to trigger a bloody turf war that would damage the city's economy. Instead, he utilized biotechnology fused with the magic of the Lifeline tablet. Because Bruno carried the combined bloodlines of New York's two largest crime families, his DNA was the ultimate master key. Mr. Negative drained Bruno's blood, extracted the genetic code, and combined it with the tablet's entropy energy to weaponize a targeting biochemical gas. The terror of this toxin lay in its programming. It was designed to exclusively target and eliminate those sharing the same lineage or matching genetic codes with the two mafia families. If released into a high-level underworld summit, every boss, capo, and loyal henchman would drop dead within seconds, while ordinary civilians standing right next to them would remain completely unscathed. This was an absolute purge, allowing Mr. Negative to wipe out the old regime and claim the throne of New York's underworld without wasting a single bullet. Meanwhile, Spider-Man, back in his webbed suit, began using his tracking device to locate his stolen web shooters. However, because the spider tracer had been accidentally tagged onto Bruno's henchmen, the tracking signal led Spider-Man straight into Mr. Negative's secret facility, where the blood-draining experiment was underway, rather than the petty thief's hideout. Spider-Man's sudden intrusion created a highly ironic and misunderstood situation akin to dark comedy. Paranoid by nature as a criminal genius, Mr. Negative saw Spider-Man crash in and instantly assumed the wall crawler had been secretly investigating him for a long time, uncovering the entire biological genocide plot. Conversely, Peter Parker had absolutely no idea what the hell was happening before his eyes. Spider-Man's sheer cluelessness stood in stark contrast to Mr. Negative's grim seriousness and tension. To safeguard the experiment, Mr. Negative ordered his army of inner demons to swarm Spider-Man. A fierce melee erupted. Spider-Man proved exactly why he remains one of the world's premier superheroes, easily overwhelming the numbers with his agility and spider reflexes. In a desperate bid to thwart the scheme, Spider-Man used his strength to shatter the ancient Lifeline tablet into pieces. Had it been a traditional supervillain like Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, or Scorpion seeing their ultimate artifact destroyed, they would have roared in fury, lashed out recklessly, or fallen into despair. But not Mr. Negative. He just stood there, watching the tablet crumble with a terrifyingly calm, icy smile. This detail highlighted the sheer scale of Mr. Negative's intellect. He was not bound by material objects. He was a scientist and strategist who understood data backup. The tablet was merely the initial tool. All mystical and biological formulas had already been digitized and fully archived. The experiment on Bruno was a success, and the toxin had been mass-produced. He calmly walked out the back door, abandoning a dying Bruno and leaving Spider-Man behind at the scene. Forced to prioritize saving Bruno's life, Spider-Man inadvertently bought Mr. Negative enough time to deploy the next phase of his plan, pumping the bioweapon into the very building where the two mafia families were holding a summit to divide up their territories. When Spider-Man carried Bruno into the meeting room to warn them, another disastrous misunderstanding took place. Seeing Spider-Man burst in, the mafia bosses assumed he was the mastermind behind the attack, or a police officer sent to wipe them out. They immediately drew their weapons and opened fire blindly. Spider-Man had to pull off a breathless display of acrobatics, dodging a hailstorm of bullets from rival gangs while trying to force open the ventilation system to save them. However, Mr. Negative's toxin dispersed too quickly. Within mere heartbeats, a gray mist flooded the room. Every boss, capo, and henchman related by blood to the two families began clutching their throats, coughing up blood, and collapsing in droves over the banquet tables. The scene turned into a mini graveyard. As the smoke cleared, a horrified Spider-Man realized only a single henchman remained standing, completely unaffected by the gas. Spider-Man rushed over to pull him up, and the henchman, in utter panic, revealed a terrifying secret. He survived because he was adopted, bearing no biological bloodline to the family. Spider-Man instantly realized the full magnitude of Mr. Negative's cruelty. This mob boss didn't just want to eliminate the bad guys sitting in that room. The biochemical gas programmed with Bruno's DNA would ride the air currents to hunt down and slaughter every wife, child, elder, and infant, anyone sharing that bloodline currently living in New York. Martin Lee was no mere criminal fighting for turf. He was a ruthless genocidal maniac, willing to slaughter innocent children to achieve his ultimate goal. Following intelligence reports, Spider-Man learned that the wives, children, and families of the mafia members were all gathering at a massive local circus to watch a performance. This was a public venue, packed with thousands of innocent civilians. Mr. Negative had deployed his men to plant a toxin dispersal device there. However, to ensure the gas would blanket the entire circus, the device was attached to a conventional explosive bomb. This meant that while the DNA-targeted gas would only kill those of the mafia bloodline, the physical blast from the bomb and the ensuing crowd panic would sweep up and slaughter hundreds, if not thousands, of unrelated innocent bystanders. Spider-Man stormed into the circus right as the show reached its climax. Seeing the bomb ticking down with no time left for an evacuation, Peter did the only thing a superhero could do. He lunged forward, grabbed the biochemical bomb, and with every ounce of his strength, hurled it high into the sky, tearing through the circus roof. The bomb detonated in midair, releasing the lethal gas harmlessly into the upper atmosphere and averting a horrific tragedy. He turned back down, screaming at everyone to evacuate the circus immediately. Although Spider-Man had just saved thousands of lives, from the perspective of the ordinary spectators, they had absolutely no idea a bomb or a DNA bioweapon even existed. All they saw was Spider-Man, the hero who had been missing for 100 days, suddenly appearing like a lunatic, crashing the circus, snatching a box, throwing it into the sky to cause a massive explosion that shook the city, and then hysterically shouting at the crowd. This disastrous misunderstanding was immediately and ruthlessly exploited by Dexter Bennett, the new boss of the Daily Bugle. Exactly as Robbie Robertson had predicted, the newsroom was starved for Spider-Man coverage. Bennett instantly ran sensationalized, truth-bending front-page headlines. Spider-Man is a threat. Spider-Man is a dangerous psychopath. Spider-Man's image was once again dragged through the media mud. The people of New York began to view him with wariness, fear, and skepticism. Yeah, maybe he just saved people, but his actions are incredibly suspicious and erratic. Who knows when he'll truly snap? As Spider-Man stepped into the backstage area of the circus, exhausted from the battle and the blast, he unexpectedly came face to face with Martin Lee. At that moment, Martin Lee was standing next to a little girl, the daughter of one of the deceased mafia bosses. In his hand, Martin Lee held a vial containing the last of Peter Parker's blood, which he had collected from their previous clash, or through biological traces. This was the darkest moment, showcasing Mr. Negative's insidious psychological assault. He knew Spider-Man possessed a fatal weakness, his compassion and his vow to never let an innocent person die in front of him. Martin Lee raised the vial and offered a cold, ruthless trade. This is only enough blood for one person. If you want the girl to live, give me your blood. Without a moment's hesitation, Peter Parker accepted, letting Martin Lee draw his blood sample in exchange for the child's safety. Having secured Spider-Man's blood sample, Martin Lee looked at him with a smile that sent a shiver down his spine. Spider-Man asked, "So you want to create a toxin that can kill me?" But Mr. Negative's response elevated the horror to a terrifying new level. "Oh, you're thinking too small. I don't just want to kill you. I want to kill everyone who knows you. If you dare cross me again, what I create will be unleashed across the entire city. I don't know who you are, and I don't know where you live, but I know your family is out there somewhere in these 5 boroughs. I will blanket all of New York with it, and to everyone else it will be completely harmless, except for you and your family." This was a tactically flawless threat. Mr. Negative didn't need to know who Peter Parker was beneath the mask. He didn't need to hunt down the home addresses of Aunt May or Carly Cooper. He only needed to use Spider-Man's blood to engineer a new spider-targeted DNA bioweapon, then use helicopters or ventilation systems to blanket all 5 boroughs of New York City. That mist would be completely harmless to 8 million ordinary citizens, but any blood relative or anyone sharing genetic markers with Peter Parker, like Aunt May, who inadvertently inhaled it, would drop dead instantly. The sheer extremism of this threat completely paralyzed Spider-Man, forcing the wall-crawler to stand frozen, watching his enemy walk away in utter helplessness. He was forced to temporarily back down to protect the lives of those he loved. Although Spider-Man suffered a bitter defeat at the hands of Mr. Negative, his heroic act of throwing the bomb at the circus yielded an entirely unexpected outcome. Every single survivor, the wives, children, and remaining members of the 2 New York mafia families, fully understood that it was Spider-Man who had saved their lives from a targeted criminal genocide. This inadvertently forged a covert, reluctant alliance between Spider-Man and the mafia remnants. Grateful for their survival, they were now willing to provide undercover intelligence, financial backing, or logistical support to the wall-crawler. This twist handed Spider-Man a massive strategic advantage to counter Mr. Negative's inner demon's empire in the future. Although Spider-Man suffered a bitter defeat at the hands of Mr. Negative, his heroic act of throwing the bomb at the circus yielded an entirely unexpected outcome. Every single survivor, the wives, children, and remaining members of the 2 New York mafia families, fully understood that it was Spider-Man who had saved their lives from a targeted criminal genocide. This inadvertently forged a covert, reluctant alliance between Spider-Man and the mafia remnants. Grateful for their survival, they were now willing to provide undercover intelligence, financial backing, or logistical support to the wall-crawler. This twist handed Spider-Man a massive strategic advantage to counter Mr. Negative's inner demon's empire in the future. The Spider-Man Brand New Day Volume 1 arc successfully achieved its ultimate objective, restoring the baseline status quo for the character. Marvel completely dismantled Peter Parker's established life, stripping him down to a broke, hustling youth facing financial distress, overdue rent, and relentless media backlash. Every narrative threat, his relationship with Aunt May, the new management at the Bugle, and a fresh wave of adversaries was precisely positioned on the meteoric grid, preparing for a long-term, epic saga envisioned by Dan Slott. This heavily echoes what we are bound to experience in the highly anticipated live-action adaptation releasing this year. And that is how Spider-Man Brand New Day revolutionized the comic books. What's your take on this storyline? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and remember to like and subscribe to the channel to catch all our latest and greatest content.
After so many times saying it, thank you seems soft.